The silence hit me like a sniper's bullet to the chest. Emma's bedroom window was wide open, curtains dancing in the cold October wind, and her iPhone lay shattered across the hardwood floor like broken promises. Hit like, subscribe for more betrayal stories, and comment your location. I stood in that doorway at 3:47 a.m., my heart hammering against my ribs like it was trying to escape. 12 years as a Navy SEAL, and I'd never felt terror like this. Not in Fallujah. Not in Afghanistan. Nothing compared to seeing my 16-year-old daughter's empty bed, sheets thrown back like she'd been ripped from sleep. Dad. I'd heard her voice through the thin walls around midnight. A soft call, maybe a nightmare. I should have checked on her. Should have trusted that gut instinct that kept me alive through 3 combat deployments. Instead, I rolled over and went back to sleep. The local cops arrived 40 minutes after my frantic call. Detective Morrison, a heavy-set guy with tired eyes, walked through Emma's room like he was inspecting a hotel checkout. "Any reason she might want to run away, Mr. Carter?" Morrison asked, scribbling notes that looked more like grocery lists. "She didn't run away." My voice came out harder than I intended. "Someone took her." Morrison glanced at the open window, then back at me with that look, the one that said he'd seen this movie 1,000 times before. Teenage girl. Divorced parents. Classic runaway situation. Look, I get it. You're worried. But 90% of these cases, the kid shows up at a friend's house within 24 hours. They just need space to cool off. You don't understand. I stepped closer to him, close enough that he could see the scar running from my left temple to my jaw. A reminder of what happens when you underestimate threats. Emma doesn't run from problems. She faces them head on, just like I taught her. The detective's pen stopped moving. "When's the last time you spoke to her mother?" "Rachel?" 2 weeks ago. About Emma's college applications." The words tasted bitter. My ex-wife had been pushing Emma towards schools on the East Coast. Far from me. Far from California, where we'd built our life together after the divorce. Maybe she went there. Kids get overwhelmed with all that college pressure. I wanted to grab Morrison by his cheap polyester tie and explain what I knew in my bones. Emma wouldn't disappear without telling me. Not after everything we'd been through together. Not after I'd promised her that I'd always be there, that I'd never abandon her like her mother had abandoned us both. But Morrison was already heading for the door, his investigation lasting all of 12 minutes. "We'll put out a bolo alert. Check with her friends tomorrow." Most of these situations resolve themselves pretty quick. After he left, I sat on Emma's bed and held her pillow. It still smelled like her shampoo, some expensive stuff Rachel insisted on buying. Vanilla and jasmine. The scent that always announced Emma's presence when she'd sneak into my home office to show me her latest art project or complain about her chemistry teacher. That's when I noticed something Morrison had missed entirely. Emma's art supplies were gone. Not just a sketchbook, everything. Her charcoal pencils, her watercolor set, the small easel I'd bought her for her birthday last month. Emma never went anywhere without her art supplies. Not even to school. Someone had taken them. Someone who knew that Emma would need something familiar, something comforting, wherever they were planning to take her. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Stop looking or you'll never see her again." The message deleted itself 3 seconds later. I stared at the blank screen, my training kicking in like muscle memory. This wasn't a runaway case. This was an abduction. Professional, calculated, and personal. Someone had been watching Emma, studying her routine, learning her habits, and they'd made the mistake of taking the daughter of a man who'd spent his entire adult life hunting down people who hurt innocents. 72 hours. That's how long the statistics say you have before a missing person case turns from rescue to recovery. I wasn't going to let Emma become a statistic. I'd barely slept since finding that empty room, surviving on black coffee and the kind of focused rage that kept me sharp during night raids in Kandahar. The police had done exactly what I expected, nothing. Detective Morrison called twice to ask if Emma had turned up yet, like she was a lost set of car keys. My kitchen table had transformed into a tactical operations center. Emma's school schedule, her friend's contact information, maps of every route between our house and her usual hangouts. I'd already called her 3 closest friends, Melissa, Ashley, and Brooklyn. All of them sounded genuinely shocked that Emma was missing. No fake concern, no hesitation in their voices. These girls didn't know anything. That's when I made the call I'd been avoiding. "Marcus, it's David. I need the team." Marcus Chin had been my spotter for 4 years in the SEALs. The kind of guy who could put a bullet through a dime at 800 meters and crack jokes while doing it. He'd retired 2 years before me and now ran a private security company in San Diego. "Jesus, Carter. It's been what, 3 years? You finally ready to come work for me instead of playing suburban dad?" Someone took Emma. The joking stopped immediately. Marcus had met my daughter twice at team reunions. Watched her show off her artwork to a bunch of hardened operators who melted into teddy bears around her. When, 3 nights ago, local cops think she's a runaway. I know better. Where do you need me? This is why I loved working with SEALs. No wasted words. No unnecessary questions. Just immediate commitment to the mission. Marcus arrived 6 hours later with Tony Ramirez and Jake Sullivan, the rest of our old 4-man reconnaissance team. Tony had transitioned to cybersecurity after leaving the Navy, and Jake worked as a private investigator specializing in missing persons cases. Looking at them gathered around my kitchen table, I felt something I hadn't experienced in days: hope. "Talk to me," Jake said, spreading out a legal pad covered in neat handwriting. "What do we know?" I walked them through everything. The open window, the missing art supplies, the self-deleting text message, the police department's complete lack of urgency. "The text message is interesting," Tony said, pulling out a laptop that looked like it could hack into the Pentagon. "Even deleted messages leave traces on cell towers. Give me your phone." While Tony worked his digital magic, Marcus examined Emma's bedroom with the methodical precision of someone trained to spot IEDs buried in roadside dirt. "Window screen was cut from the outside," he announced after 10 minutes. "Clean cuts, probably a utility knife. Whoever did this came prepared." Jake interviewed me like a witness instead of a friend, asking questions I hadn't thought to consider. What was Emma's relationship like with her mother? Had there been any unusual people around the house lately? Any changes in Emma's behavior or mood in the weeks before she disappeared? That last question stopped me cold. Actually, yeah, she'd been getting text messages that made her nervous. I asked about it, but she said it was just some guy from school being weird. "You have her phone records?" "The police said they'd request them, but..." I shrugged. We all knew how that was going. "I can get them faster," Tony said without looking up from his screen. "What's her number?" Within 2 hours, Tony had Emma's complete text message history for the past month. Most of it was typical teenage stuff: complaints about homework, plans to meet friends at the mall, arguments with her mother about curfew. But scattered throughout were messages from a number not in her contacts. Messages that started friendly and gradually became more invasive. "Hey Emma, saw you at the coffee shop downtown. You're even prettier in person. I know you go to Roosevelt High. Maybe we could meet up sometime. I noticed you take the same route home from school every day. You should be more careful walking alone. Your dad seems pretty protective. Does he know about us talking?" The final message had arrived the morning Emma disappeared. "Trust me, Emma. Everything's going to be okay after tonight." My hands were shaking as I read through them. Emma had never responded to any of these messages, but she hadn't blocked the number either. Probably didn't want to escalate whatever this was. "This is stalking behavior," Jake said grimly. "Classic pattern. Build familiarity, establish surveillance, then escalate to contact." Emma was being hunted. Tony's fingers flew across his keyboard. "Got the phone records. This number, it's registered to a prepaid account purchased with cash 3 months ago. But I can track the cell tower data." He pulled up a map showing the location of every call and text from the unknown number. The pattern made my blood turn to ice water. The messages had been sent from locations near Emma's school, near our house, near the coffee shop where she worked part-time on weekends. This person had been following her daily routine for months. There's more. Tony continued, his voice tight with anger. The night Emma disappeared, this phone was active near your house from 11 p.m. to 4 a.m. Then it went dark. Completely dark. Marcus looked up from studying crime scene photos he'd taken of Emma's room. Professional job. They studied her patterns, disabled their phone after the grab, and they knew exactly how to bypass your security system without triggering any alarms. What security system? I asked. Exactly my point. You're a Navy SEAL living in suburban California with a teenage daughter, and you don't have motion sensors, cameras, or perimeter alerts. They knew you were operating under peacetime rules. The realization hit me like a physical blow. I let my guard down. After years of combat deployments where every shadow could hide an enemy, I'd moved to a quiet neighborhood and started living like threats didn't exist. I'd failed the most basic principle of personal security, protecting what matters most. So what's our next move? I asked. Jake looked at the message timeline again. We find out who bought that phone. Tony, can you pull security footage from stores that sell prepaid phones within a 20-mile radius? Already on it. Marcus, I need you to canvass the neighborhood. Someone saw something. They always do. What about me? Jake met my eyes with the serious expression of someone about to deliver bad news. You're going to call Emma's mother. Find out if she's been in contact with anyone new recently. And David. He paused. Prepare yourself for the possibility that this goes deeper than random stalking. The coordination, the timing, the professional execution. This feels personal. The phone rang 4 times before Rachel answered, and I could hear slot machines chiming in the background. My ex-wife was at a casino at 2 p.m. on a Tuesday. Typical. David? What's wrong? You sound terrible. Emma's missing, Rachel. She was taken from her bedroom 3 nights ago. The slot machine sound stopped abruptly. I heard footsteps, probably Rachel moving somewhere quieter. Missing? What do you mean missing? Did you call the police? Something in her voice felt wrong. Not the immediate panic I'd expected from a mother hearing her daughter was gone. More like preparation. Like she was ready for this conversation. Rachel, I need to know if Emma mentioned anyone bothering her lately. Text messages, people following her, anything unusual. No, nothing like that. She seemed fine when we talked last week. But her answer came too fast, too rehearsed. In 12 years of marriage, I'd learned to read Rachel's tells. The slight uptick in pitch when she lied. The way she answered questions before fully processing them. Where are you right now? I asked. At home, working on some client files. Through the phone, I heard the unmistakable electronic melody of a jackpot payout. Rachel was lying about her location, which meant she was probably lying about everything else. I'm coming over, I said. No, David, that's not. I hung up and grabbed my keys. Rachel lived 20 minutes away in a gated community she couldn't afford on her real estate agent salary. I'd always wondered how she managed the mortgage payments, especially after her clients started drying up last year. The security guard at the gate waved me through. He remembered me from the years when Emma and I would visit for custody exchanges. Rachel's BMW wasn't in the driveway, which confirmed she'd lied about being home. I used the spare key hidden under the fake rock by her front door, a security flaw I'd pointed out dozens of times during our marriage. Rachel's house felt different. Cleaner than usual, like someone had scrubbed away evidence. The dining room table was covered with real estate documents, but they all looked old. Contracts from months ago, not current client work. In her home office, I found what I was looking for. Rachel's computer was still logged in, displaying her online banking account. I shouldn't have looked, but something Tony said kept echoing in my head. This feels personal. The account showed a $50,000 deposit from 5 days ago. 5 days, 2 days before Emma disappeared. The transaction came from an account registered to Pacific Coast Holdings, a name that meant nothing to me but felt deliberately vague. My phone buzzed with a text from Tony. Found something. Get back here now. I photographed Rachel's banking information and left everything exactly as I'd found it. If Rachel was involved in Emma's disappearance, I couldn't let her know I was onto her. The drive back to my house felt like the longest 20 minutes of my life. Every scenario running through my mind was worse than the last. Rachel needed money. She'd been struggling financially for years. But selling information about your own daughter? Betraying Emma to strangers who'd obviously been planning something terrible? I pulled into my driveway to find Marcus pacing in my front yard, his face grim. "You need to see this," he said without preamble. Inside, Tony had connected his laptop to my TV, displaying security footage from an electronics store 15 miles away. "This is from 3 months ago," Tony explained. "The day that prepaid phone was purchased." The footage showed a woman with dark hair buying a phone with cash. The image quality wasn't perfect, but the profile was unmistakable. "Rachel, there's more," Jake said quietly. "I ran a background check on Pacific Coast Holdings. It's a shell company registered in Nevada, but the trail leads back to something much worse." He handed me a printed report that made my knees buckle. Pacific Coast Holdings was connected to a network of companies involved in human trafficking. Young women, specifically. The FBI had been investigating them for 2 years, but couldn't gather enough evidence for arrests. "David," Marcus said gently, "your ex-wife didn't just provide information about Emma. She sold her to traffickers." The room went silent except for the sound of my own breathing, which had become shallow and rapid. Rachel, the woman I'd married, the mother of my child, had literally sold our daughter into slavery for $50,000. "How long have they been planning this?" My voice sounded like it was coming from someone else. Tony pulled up more data. "Based on the phone records and banking transactions, at least 6 months. The stalking messages, learning Emma's routine, studying your security habits. This was a long-term operation. And Rachel was feeding them information the entire time." Jake nodded grimly. "Emma's school schedule, her work shifts, when you'd be home, when you wouldn't. Everything they needed to grab her cleanly." I thought about all the times Rachel had asked seemingly innocent questions about Emma's life. What time did she get home from school? Was I still working those overnight shifts at the consulting firm? Did Emma still take that art class on Thursday evenings? Questions I'd answered honestly because I trusted her. Because despite our divorce, despite all our problems, I never imagined she'd hurt Emma. "Where is she now?" I asked. Marcus checked his watch. Rachel's BMW just pulled into the casino parking lot downtown. "She's been gambling for the past 4 hours." "Celebrating," I said, the word tasting like poison. "Probably. But David, we can't confront her yet. If she's working with traffickers, spooking her could get Emma killed. These people don't leave witnesses." Tony was already pulling up new data on his screen. "I've been tracking the money trail from Pacific Coast Holdings. Emma's not the first girl they've taken. There's a pattern: teenage daughters of single fathers, usually military or law enforcement. Men who'd be dangerous if they knew the truth. How many others? At least 12 in the past 3 years. All along the West Coast." The magnitude of what we were dealing with was starting to sink in. This wasn't just about Emma. This was an organized operation that had been destroying families for years, and my ex-wife was an active participant. "Can we trace where they take the girls?" Jake looked at his notes. "Working on it. But David, you need to understand. If Rachel sold Emma to these people, your daughter is probably already out of state. Maybe out of the country." I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the quiet suburban street where Emma had learned to ride her bike, where we played catch in the front yard, where I'd taught her to change a tire when she turned 16. Somewhere out there, my little girl was trapped with monsters, and her own mother had put her there. "What's our next move?" I asked. Marcus was already loading ammunition into his sidearm. "We're going to have a conversation with Rachel, and she's going to tell us exactly where our daughter is." We intercepted Rachel in the casino parking lot at 11:47 p.m. She was walking to her BMW, clutching a small purse and swaying slightly, the gait of someone who'd been drinking to celebrate. Marcus appeared from behind a concrete pillar like a shadow made flesh. "Hello, Rachel." She spun around, her face cycling through surprise, fear, and finally settling on defiance. "What are you doing here? You can't just..." Get in the car, I said, stepping out from behind her vehicle. Rachel's eyes darted between Marcus and me, probably calculating her chances of screaming for help before we could stop her. In the harsh fluorescent lighting of the parking garage, she looked older than I remembered. Harder. David, I don't know what you think. $50,000 from Pacific Coast Holdings, I said quietly. Deposited into your account 2 days before Emma disappeared. You want to explain that? The defiance cracked. Rachel's shoulders sagged, and for a moment, she looked like the woman I'd married 15 years ago. Vulnerable. Lost. You don't understand, she whispered. I didn't have a choice. There's always a choice, Marcus said. You chose money over your daughter's life. Jake pulled up in his black SUV, and we guided Rachel into the back seat. No force necessary. She moved like someone who'd been expecting this moment. During the 20-minute drive to an abandoned warehouse Tony had scouted earlier, Rachel told us everything. The gambling debts had started small. A few hundred here and there to feel the rush, to escape the loneliness of her empty house after Emma started spending more time with me. But addiction doesn't stay small. They were going to kill me, Rachel said, staring out the window at the passing streetlights. I owed these people, dangerous people, over $200,000. They said I had 2 weeks to pay, or what? They showed me pictures, David. What they do to people who don't pay. I couldn't end up like that. So you sold your daughter instead. Rachel flinched like I'd slapped her. It wasn't supposed to be permanent. They said she'd be working for them for a few years, modeling maybe, and then she'd be free. They said she wouldn't be hurt. The naivety was staggering. Or maybe it was just willful blindness, believing whatever lie let her sleep at night. Rachel, Jake said from the front seat, his voice gentle but firm. These people are human traffickers. They don't release girls after a few years. They use them until they break, and then they dispose of them. She started crying then. Deep, ugly sobs that shook her whole body. I know. But I was so scared, and they made it sound like Emma would be okay. Where is she now? I don't know. They said they'd move her somewhere safe, but they didn't tell me where. They said it was better if I didn't know. Tony was running traces on Rachel's phone while she talked, looking for any communication with her handlers. Last contact was the night Emma was taken. A text saying, package delivered. Your debt is cleared. We'd reached the warehouse. Marcus parked in the shadow of the building, away from any streetlights or security cameras. This conversation needed to happen somewhere private. Inside the empty space, Rachel looked small and fragile under the harsh LED work lights Jake had set up. But I couldn't feel sorry for her. Not when Emma was somewhere out there, scared and alone. Tell me about your contact, I said. His name is Vincent Moreau. French accent, expensive suits. He runs some kind of import business, but everyone knows it's not legitimate. Tony looked up from his laptop. Vincent Moreau has FBI files going back 10 years. Money laundering, racketeering, suspected human trafficking. They've never been able to make charges stick. He has a club downtown, Rachel continued. The Blue Room. Very exclusive. That's where I met with him. How many times? 3. The first time was just to assess the situation. He asked questions about Emma. Her schedule, her habits, whether she had a boyfriend, what kind of security you had at the house. Each detail felt like another knife to my chest. Rachel had been systematically betraying our daughter for months. The second meeting was to finalize terms. He gave me half the money up front, $25,000, and said I'd get the rest when the job was done. And the third meeting? Rachel's voice became barely a whisper. 2 days ago. To give him Emma's updated schedule and confirm that you'd be working late that night. He gave me the rest of the money and said I should take a vacation, maybe leave town for a while. That's when I understood the full scope of their operation. They'd been planning Emma's disappearance for months, but they'd also been planning Rachel's getaway. If I hadn't connected the dots so quickly, Rachel would have vanished too, leaving no trail for anyone to follow. Vincent said something else. Rachel added reluctantly. He said Emma was special, that she'd bring a premium price because she was Pure. And because she was your daughter. What does that mean? Marcus answered before Rachel could. Trophy hunting. Some buyers pay extra for the daughters of military personnel. It's a power thing, breaking someone who comes from strength. The rage I'd been holding back finally broke free. I grabbed Rachel by the shoulders and lifted her out of her chair. Do you understand what you've done? Do you have any idea what they're going to do to her? David, Jake said firmly. Let her go. I released Rachel, but the fury was still burning through my veins like acid. This woman, the mother of my child, had condemned Emma to a fate worse than death for gambling money. I'm sorry, Rachel sobbed. I'm so sorry. If I could take it back, but you can't, I said coldly. So now you're going to help us get her back. Marcus was already pacing the warehouse floor, planning our next move. We need to hit Vincent Morrow hard and fast. Get him to tell us where Emma is before he can alert his network that we're coming. The Blue Room, Rachel said through her tears. He's there most nights. But David, these aren't normal criminals. They have connections everywhere. Police, judges, politicians. If you go after them directly, they'll know you're coming. Tony looked up from his research. She's right. Vincent Morrow's organization has survived FBI investigations for 10 years. They have early warning systems in place. Then we don't go through official channels, I said. We go dark. Jake nodded slowly. Black Ops rules. No backup, no official support. If we get caught, we never existed. Are you all in? I asked, looking at each of my teammates. Marcus checked his weapon and smiled grimly. Emma's family. Family means everything. Tony was already packing his electronic warfare gear. I can disable their communications and security systems. Give us a tactical advantage. Jake holstered his sidearm. I know people who can help us disappear after this is over, if it comes to that. I looked at Rachel, who was staring at us with a mixture of hope and terror. What about her? She comes with us, Marcus said. Insurance. If this goes sideways, she's our bargaining chip. Rachel started to protest, but I cut her off. You created this mess, Rachel. Now you're going to help us fix it. And if Emma gets hurt because of what you did, I let the threat hang in the air. She nodded frantically. Anything. I'll do anything to get her back. For the first time in days, I felt something like hope. We had a target, we had a plan, and we had the skills to execute it. Emma was still out there somewhere, but she wasn't alone anymore. We were coming for her. The Blue Room sat like a cancer in downtown's financial district, hidden behind unmarked doors and accessible only through a members-only elevator. From our surveillance position across the street, it looked like any other high-rise office building. But Tony's electronic reconnaissance had revealed something much darker. Infrared shows heavy foot traffic between 8 p.m. and 2 a.m., Tony reported, adjusting his surveillance equipment. Multiple exit points, including a service tunnel that connects to the parking garage 3 blocks away. We'd been watching for 18 hours, documenting every person who entered and exited. Vincent Morrow had arrived at 10:30 p.m. in a black Mercedes, flanked by 2 bodyguards who moved like ex-military. That's him, Rachel confirmed from the back seat, her voice barely audible. She'd been chain-smoking since we started surveillance, her hands shaking every time she lit another cigarette. Marcus lowered his binoculars. Security's tight, but predictable. 2 guards at the street entrance, 1 at the elevator, probably more upstairs. Standard protection for someone who knows he has enemies. Too many witnesses for a direct assault, Jake observed. We need to draw him out. That's when Tony discovered something that changed everything. I've been monitoring their digital communications, he said, pulling up encrypted messages on his laptop. Vincent's organization doesn't just traffic girls locally. They're part of something bigger, an international network. The messages painted a horrifying picture. Girls were being moved through a pipeline that stretched from California to Mexico, then overseas to buyers in Europe and Asia. Each girl was assigned a tracking number, like inventory in a warehouse. Emma's designation is Package 847, Tony continued, his voice tight with anger. Last GPS ping was from a location 60 miles south of here, near the border. My blood turned cold. If Emma had already been moved toward Mexico, we were running out of time. Once she crossed the border, finding her would become nearly impossible. When was the last ping? I asked. 12 hours ago. But here's the thing, the signal wasn't moving. It's been stationary at the same location for almost 2 days. Jake studied the GPS coordinates on Tony's screen. Could be a holding facility. Somewhere they keep girls before transport. Or it could be a trap, Marcus added grimly. If they know we're looking, they might be using Emma's phone to draw us into an ambush. Rachel spoke up from the back seat. Vincent mentioned something about a ranch. Said it was where they prepared the girls for travel. The word prepared sent ice through my veins. I didn't want to think about what that meant. Rachel, Jake said carefully, did Vincent ever mention how long girls typically stay at this ranch? A week, maybe 2. He said they needed time to break them in. Marcus slammed his fist against the dashboard. Emma's been missing for 5 days. If she's at this ranch, we're running out of time. Tony was already plotting routes on his GPS system. The location is remote. Looks like it's surrounded by farmland and desert. Good news is there's only one road in and out. Bad news is we'll be completely exposed on the approach. What about satellite surveillance? I asked. Working on it, Tony replied, his fingers flying across multiple keyboards. I've got access to some commercial satellite feeds. Give me 20 minutes. While Tony worked his digital magic, the rest of us planned the assault. The ranch was 40 miles from Vincent's club, which meant we couldn't hit both targets simultaneously with our 4-man team. We have to choose, Jake said. Go after Vincent and try to force him to talk, or hit the ranch directly and hope Emma's still there. If we grab Vincent, his people at the ranch might panic and move the girls, Marcus pointed out. But if we hit the ranch first and it's empty, Vincent will disappear, I countered. Rachel cleared her throat nervously. There might be another way. Vincent's expecting me to check in tomorrow night. He said I should call him when I get back from my vacation to confirm everything went smoothly. Jake looked interested. You could set up a meeting. Get him away from the club, somewhere we could take him quietly. He'd be suspicious, Rachel said. Vincent doesn't trust anyone completely. What if you told him there was a problem? Tony suggested, not looking up from his screens. That the police were asking questions, that you needed to leave town permanently? Rachel considered this. He might meet with me if he thought his operation was at risk. But he'd bring backup, lots of backup. Let him, Marcus said with a predatory smile. We've handled worse odds. Tony's satellite feed finally came online, showing aerial views of the ranch location. The images made my heart sink. The compound was larger than we'd expected, multiple buildings, guard towers, and what looked like a 10-foot perimeter fence. That's not a temporary holding facility, Jake observed. That's a permanent operation. How many girls do you think they're keeping there? I asked. Tony zoomed in on the satellite image. Based on the size of the dormitory buildings, maybe 20 or 30. This isn't just about Emma anymore, David. We're looking at a major trafficking hub. The weight of that realization settled over all of us. Emma was just one of dozens of girls being held at that ranch, all of them someone's daughter, all of them waiting for rescue that might never come. We need more firepower, Marcus said quietly. 4 guys against a fortified compound. Those are suicide odds. Do we have contacts who could help? I asked Jake. Maybe, but it would take time to organize, and time is something we don't have. Rachel was studying the satellite images with an expression I couldn't read. Finally, she spoke up. There's something else Vincent told me. Something I didn't mention before. We all turned to look at her. He said the ranch was just a processing center. That the real buyers would be arriving this weekend for some kind of auction. The world seemed to stop spinning. An auction meant Emma and the other girls would be sold to the highest bidders and scattered across the globe within days. When exactly? Jake demanded. Tomorrow night. Saturday night. Vincent said it was their biggest sale of the year. I checked my watch. It was already Friday afternoon. We had less than 30 hours. That's it then, I said, standing up. We hit the ranch tomorrow. All of us, full assault. Marcus was already checking his weapons. It's a long shot, but it's the only shot we have. Tony began packing his equipment. I can disable their communications and security systems, but once we're inside, we'll be on our own. Rachel, Jake said, you're going to make that call to Vincent. Tell him you need to meet urgently. We'll use that as a distraction. She nodded, fear and determination warring in her eyes. What if this doesn't work? I looked at each of my teammates, men who'd followed me through hell in Afghanistan and were now willing to risk everything to save my daughter. Then we go down fighting, I said. But Emma comes home. The ranch materialized out of the desert darkness like something from a nightmare. Through night vision scopes, we could see the full scope of Vincent Morrow's operation, and it was bigger than any of us had imagined. Jesus Christ, Marcus whispered, adjusting his scope. That's not a ranch. That's a compound. We were positioned on a ridge 800 meters from the target, close enough to see details, but far enough to avoid detection. What we saw made my blood run cold. The main house was a sprawling two-story structure surrounded by smaller buildings that looked like dormitories. Guard towers stood at each corner of the property, manned by armed sentries. But it was the activity level that told the Betrayal story. Dozens of vehicles in the parking area, lights blazing in every building, and constant movement of personnel. The auction's definitely happening, Jake observed. Look at all those luxury cars. Tony's electronic surveillance equipment was picking up radio chatter from the compound's security team. I'm counting at least 20 guards, plus whoever's inside for the auction. We're looking at 40 to 50 hostiles. And how many girls? I asked, though I dreaded the answer. Thermal imaging shows heat signatures in 3 separate dormitory buildings. Best estimate, 60 to 80. 60 to 80 girls. The number hit me like a physical blow. Emma was somewhere in that compound with dozens of other victims, all of them waiting to be sold to the highest bidder. Rachel's voice crackled through our radio. She was positioned at a truck stop 5 miles away, ready to make the call that would hopefully draw Vincent away from the compound. David, I'm scared, she said. What if he doesn't believe me? He'll believe you, Jake replied. You're going to tell him exactly what we discussed. The FBI is asking questions about Pacific Coast Holdings. You need to disappear permanently, but you need money first. And if he wants to meet at the compound, then you insist on neutral ground. Tell him you're afraid to go anywhere near the ranch with all the heat. I could hear Rachel taking deep breaths over the radio. Okay, I'm making the call now. The next 10 minutes felt like hours. We watched through our scopes as activity continued at the compound, unaware that their entire operation was about to be exposed. Finally, Rachel's voice came back over the radio. He bought it. Vincent's coming to meet me at the Sunset Motel in 20 minutes. He's bringing 2 bodyguards. Perfect, Marcus said, chambering around in his rifle. Jake, you and Tony take Vincent. David and I will hit the compound while security is distracted. Negative, I said firmly. We stick together. All of us hit the compound simultaneously. David, be smart about this. For guys against 50 is suicide. Then we even the odds. Tony looked up from his equipment with a grim smile. I might have a way to do that. Their entire security system runs through a central server. If I can get close enough to physically access it, I can shut down their communications, their alarms, and their electronic locks. How close is close enough? I need to be inside the perimeter. There's a utility building about 200 meters from the main house. If I can reach that without being detected, Marcus studied the compound layout through his scope. Patrol pattern suggests they change guards every 30 minutes. Next rotation is in 12 minutes. That's our window, Jake agreed. Tony infiltrates during the guard change, shuts down their systems. Then we go in hard and fast. It was a desperate plan with 1,000 ways to go wrong, but it was the only chance we had. What about Vincent? I asked. Rachel keeps him busy at the motel until we're done, Jake said. By the time he realizes what's happening, it'll be too late. I looked at each of my teammates. These men were risking everything, their lives, their freedom, their futures, to help me save Emma. There were no words adequate to express what that meant. Equipment check, I said. We went through our gear systematically. Body armor, weapons, ammunition, medical supplies, and the zip tie restraints we'd need to secure the guards. Tony had additional electronic warfare equipment that looked like something from a science fiction movie. Comms check, Marcus said, and we verified that our radio system was working properly. Rules of engagement? Jake asked. It was a fair question. We were about to assault a compound full of armed criminals, but we were also operating outside the law. Any mistakes could turn us from rescuers into murderers. Non-lethal force unless directly threatened, I said. Our priority is getting the girls out safely. Everything else is secondary. Marcus nodded reluctantly. Copy that. But if they start shooting, all bets are off. Tony was monitoring the compound's radio traffic. Guard rotation happening now. This is it. We moved down from the ridge like ghosts, using terrain features and shadows to mask our approach. Tony split off when we reached the perimeter fence, heading for the utility building while the rest of us took positions near the main dormitories. Through my earpiece, I could hear Tony working. Accessing server room now, bypassing security protocols. Almost got it. A long pause that made my heart pound. Systems down. Tony finally reported. Communications, alarms, and electronic locks are offline. You've got maybe 10 minutes before they realize something's wrong. Moving, Marcus whispered. We cut through the fence and entered the compound. The first dormitory building was only 50 meters away, but it felt like crossing an open battlefield. Inside the first building, we found them. 12 girls, ages ranging from maybe 14 to 20, chained to beds in a room that reeked of fear and desperation. They looked up at us with expressions of terror that broke my heart. We're here to help, I whispered, showing them my bolt cutters. We're getting you out. But Emma wasn't among them. Second building, Jake whispered over the radio. We moved through the compound like a precision instrument, clearing each building methodically. The second dormitory held 15 more girls, all of them in the same horrific conditions. Still no Emma. Third building, Marcus reported. And we've got company. Guards are starting to realize their radios aren't working. The third building was where we found her. Emma was in the back corner, chained to a bed like the others, but I could see she was fighting. Even in captivity, even terrified and alone, my daughter hadn't given up. Emma, I whispered. She looked up, and for a moment I thought she might be hallucinating. Then recognition dawned in her eyes. Dad, I'm here, sweetheart. I'm getting you out of here. As I cut through her restraints, Emma grabbed my arm with strength that surprised me. Dad, there are more girls. In the basement of the main house. They keep the younger ones separate. More girls. The horror of this place just kept expanding. How many? I asked. I don't know. Maybe 20. They brought them up for the buyers to look at. Marcus's voice crackled through my earpiece. David, we've got problems. Guards are mobilizing. They know we're here. Through the window, I could see armed men running between buildings, trying to coordinate without their radio system. All girls secured in buildings 1 through 3, Jake reported. But we need extraction now. I looked at Emma, then at the main house where 20 more victims were waiting. Dad, Emma said quietly, we can't leave them. She was right. We couldn't save some of these girls and abandon the others. Change of plans, I said over the radio. Jake, get the girls from buildings 1 and 2 to the extraction point. Marcus, you're with me and Emma. We're hitting the main house. David, that's where all the buyers are. You'll be walking into a trap. Then we spring it ourselves. The main house loomed before us like a fortress of evil, its windows blazing with light as the auction continued inside. Through thermal imaging, we could see the heat signatures of at least 30 people on the ground floor, buyers, sellers, and guards all mixed together in what Emma had described as a human marketplace. Basement access is through the kitchen, Emma whispered, staying close to my side. Despite everything she'd endured, my daughter was thinking tactically, providing intelligence that could save lives. There's a service stairway. The guards usually stay upstairs during the auctions. Marcus was studying the building's layout through his scope. Multiple entry points, but they're all covered. Front door, back door, and two side entrances all have guards posted. What about the roof? I asked. Tony's voice crackled through our earpiece from his position at the extraction point with the other rescued girls. Satellite shows a skylight over the main auction room. Could be a way in, but you'd be dropping right into the middle of everything. The sound of engines starting in the parking area caught our attention. Several luxury cars were pulling away from the compound. Buyers who'd apparently completed their purchases and were leaving with their human property. They're moving fast, Jake reported from his Overwatch position. Looks like the auction is ending ahead of schedule. If there are girls in that basement, they'll be transported soon. Emma tugged on my arm. Dad, there's something else. I heard the guards talking. They're planning to burn the buildings after everyone leaves. To destroy evidence. The implications hit me like a sledgehammer. If we didn't get those girls out now, they'd either be sold to buyers or killed to cover tracks. There was no time for elaborate planning. Emergency extraction protocol, I said over the radio. Jake, how long can you hold the perimeter? Maybe 10 minutes before security reinforcements arrive from the main road. Tony, can you create a distraction? Something to draw the guards outside. Already on it. I can overload their backup generator. Should create enough smoke and noise to get their attention. Marcus was chambering rounds in his assault rifle. David, once we go in there, we're committed. No turning back, no calling for backup. I know. Emma looked between Marcus and me with fierce determination. I want to help. Absolutely not, I said firmly. You're staying with Tony at the extraction point. Dad, I know the layout better than anyone. I know which rooms have cameras, which hallways have guards, where they keep the keys to the basement cells. She was right, but every fiber of my being rebelled against putting Emma in more danger. Listen to me, Emma continued. Those girls down there, they're younger than me. Some of them are barely 13. They're terrified, and they don't speak English. If strangers in tactical gear come charging down there, they might not understand that you're trying to help. Marcus nodded grimly. She has a point. Traumatized victims sometimes resist rescue attempts. Emma can get them to trust us, get them moving quickly, Jake added over the radio. Time is the critical factor here. I looked at my daughter, 16 years old, having survived days of captivity, now volunteering to walk back into hell to save other girls. Part of me was terrified. Another part had never been more proud. If you come with us, you follow orders exactly, I said. No heroics. No taking unnecessary risks. I understand. Tony's voice interrupted our planning. Overloading the generator now. You'll have your distraction in 30 seconds. Through the windows of the main house, we could see the auction winding down. Men in expensive suits were shaking hands, completing transactions for human lives like they were buying livestock. Extraction vehicles are in position, Jake reported. But David, once we start this, the entire compound will go into lockdown. We'll be fighting our way out. Better than letting those girls burn. An explosion lit up the night as Tony's sabotage created a massive electrical fire in the generator building. Immediately, guards started running toward the distraction, shouting orders and trying to coordinate without their radio system. Now, Marcus said. We moved toward the main house using the chaos as cover. The back entrance was temporarily unguarded as security personnel responded to the fire. Emma led us through a service corridor that smelled of industrial cleaning supplies and fear. The sounds of the auction filtered through the walls. Laughter, conversation, and the occasional sound of money changing hands. Kitchens through here, Emma whispered, pointing to a set of double doors. Basement access is past the walk-in freezer. Marcus went first, weapon ready, clearing each room methodically. The kitchen was empty. Staff had apparently been dismissed for security during the auction. The basement door was reinforced steel with an electronic lock that had been disabled by Tony's system shutdown. It swung open to reveal a stairway descending into darkness. Girls are kept in 3 rooms down there, Emma explained as we descended. They rotate them based on what the buyers want to see. The basement was a maze of concrete corridors and reinforced doors. Through the first door, we found 8 girls ranging in age from maybe 12 to 15. They shrank back when they saw us, terror evident in their eyes. Emma stepped forward, speaking softly in English and Spanish. "It's okay. We're here to help. We're getting you out of here." Slowly, carefully, she convinced them to trust us. Marcus cut through their restraints while I kept watch on the corridor. 2 more rooms, Emma said, leading us deeper into the basement. The second room held 6 girls, all of them in the same horrific condition. The third room was the worst. 5 girls who couldn't have been older than 13, chained and drugged into compliance. "Monsters," Marcus muttered, his jaw clenched with rage. As we freed the last of the basement prisoners, Tony's voice crackled urgently through our earpiece. "David, you need to move now." Vincent Moreau just arrived at the compound with a full security team. Rachel's cover is blown. Through the basement ceiling, we could hear shouting and running footsteps. The auction had been interrupted, and they knew we were in the building. "Extraction route compromised," Jake reported. "They've got the main exits covered." Emma tugged on my arm. "There's another way out. A tunnel that connects to the old storm drain system. The guards don't know about it because it's not on any official blueprints." "Where?" "Through the wine cellar. It was built during Prohibition for smuggling alcohol." We gathered the 19 rescued girls and moved toward the wine cellar, but the sound of boots on the basement stairs told us we were out of time. "Contact," Marcus whispered, raising his weapon. 3 guards appeared at the end of the corridor, assault rifles ready. "Federal agents," I shouted, hoping to buy a few seconds of confusion. "Release your weapons." It worked for exactly 2 heartbeats before the shooting started. Marcus and I returned fire while Emma shepherded the terrified girls toward the wine cellar. The narrow corridor worked in our favor. The guards couldn't bring their superior numbers to bear. "Go, go, go," I shouted to Emma as she led the girls through a hidden door behind the wine racks. More guards were coming down the stairs. We were about to be trapped between multiple hostile forces with 19 traumatized victims depending on us for survival. "Dad," Emma called from the wine cellar. "The tunnel's here, but it's narrow. The girls will have to crawl." Above us, the sound of the auction had been replaced by angry shouting and the stamp of boots as Vincent Moreau's men searched the building. We had minutes, maybe less, before they found us. The tunnel was barely 4 feet high and reeked of decades-old water damage, but it was our only way out. Emma crawled ahead with the youngest girls, her voice calm and reassuring despite the gunfire echoing behind us. "Just a little further," she whispered to a terrified 12-year-old who was shaking uncontrollably. "We're almost safe." Marcus and I brought up the rear, pausing every few yards to listen for pursuit. The sound of boots and shouting grew fainter as we moved deeper into the storm drain system, but I knew Vincent's men would find the tunnel entrance eventually. "How far to the exit?" I asked Emma. "Maybe 200 yards. It comes out near the highway." 200 yards had never felt so far. The girls were exhausted and traumatized, some of them barely able to crawl. Every few minutes, we had to stop and encourage someone who was having a panic attack or couldn't physically continue. I can't breathe," gasped one of the older girls, hyperventilating in the confined space. Emma immediately crawled back to her. "Hey, look at me. What's your name?" "Sophia." "Sophia, I'm Emma. I was trapped too, just like you. But my dad came for me, just like he came for all of us. You're going to be okay." Watching my 16-year-old daughter comfort other victims while bullets had been flying minutes earlier filled me with a pride so fierce it hurt. Tony's voice crackled through my earpiece. "David, Jake's got transport waiting at the highway." But Vincent's called in reinforcements. Multiple vehicles approaching from town. "How long do we have?" maybe 10 minutes before they set up roadblocks. We pushed harder, half carrying the girls who couldn't keep up. The tunnel seemed endless, a claustrophobic nightmare that stretched into darkness ahead of us. Finally, Emma called back. I can see light. The exit was a concrete culvert that emerged in a drainage ditch beside Highway 78. Jake was waiting with 2 stolen panel vans, their engines running. Everybody in. Jake shouted as we emerged from the tunnel. Move, move, move. Getting 19 traumatized girls into vehicles while keeping them calm was like trying to herd terrified cats. But Emma took charge with the natural authority of someone who'd shared their experience. You're in the blue van, she told one group. You're in the white van, she directed another. Everyone stays together. Nobody gets left behind. As the last girl climbed into the vehicles, Marcus spotted headlights in the distance, multiple vehicles speeding toward our position. Vincent's people, he confirmed through his scope. 3 SUVs, maybe 4 minutes out. Jake, get them out of here, I ordered. Take Highway 78 north to the safe house. What about you? Marcus and I are going to buy you time. Get those girls to safety. That's the mission. Emma grabbed my arm through the van window. Dad, come with us. I will, sweetheart. But not yet. Marcus was already setting up an ambush position in the drainage ditch. David, we can't hold off 3 carloads of armed men. We don't have to hold them off. We just have to delay them long enough for the vans to disappear. The approaching vehicles were closer now, maybe 2 minutes away. Jake's vans pulled onto the highway and accelerated north, carrying Emma and the other rescued girls toward freedom. Tony, what's your status? I asked over the radio. Clear of the compound. Rachel's in federal custody. She turned herself in at the FBI field office 20 minutes ago. Good. Rachel would face justice for what she'd done, but at least she'd made the right choice at the end. The first SUV rounded the curve at high speed, headlights sweeping across our position. Marcus and I opened fire simultaneously, targeting the engine block and tires rather than the occupants. The vehicle spun off the road and crashed into the opposite ditch. The second SUV skidded to a stop, its occupants taking cover behind open doors. Federal agents. I shouted, hoping to create confusion. Throw down your weapons. Automatic weapons fire answered me, bullets whining off the concrete culvert above our heads. Marcus tossed a smoke grenade into the road, creating a gray cloud that obscured visibility. Time to go, he said. We low-crawled through the drainage ditch away from the highway, using darkness and terrain to break contact. Behind us, Vincent's men were shouting orders and firing blindly into the smoke. My phone buzzed with a text from Jake. All packages delivered safely. Extraction complete. Emma was safe. All the girls were safe. For the first time in a week, I could breathe. The FBI safe house was a nondescript ranch home 40 miles north of the compound, surrounded by rolling hills and far from any main roads. When Marcus and I finally arrived 3 hours after the rescue, Emma ran to me like she was 5 years old again. I thought they might have caught you, she said, her voice muffled against my chest. Takes more than a few traffickers to stop an old seal. I replied, trying to keep my voice light despite the exhaustion that was hitting me like a freight train. Special Agent Sarah Chun, no relation to Marcus, was waiting for us with a full debrief team. The FBI had been tracking Vincent Moreau's operation for months, but they'd never been able to gather enough evidence for arrests. What you four accomplished tonight just handed us the biggest human trafficking bust in West Coast history, Agent Chun said. 19 victims recovered, multiple arrests, and enough evidence to shut down their entire network. What about Vincent? I asked. In custody. Your ex-wife's testimony, combined with the physical evidence from the compound, gave us everything we needed for federal trafficking charges. He's looking at life without parole. The next few hours were a blur of debriefings, medical examinations for the rescued girls, and coordination with social services. Each girl would need trauma counseling, legal assistance, and help reconnecting with their families. Some of them had been missing for months. Emma stayed close to me throughout the process, but I could see her watching the other girls with a protective instinct that reminded me painfully of myself. "They're going to be okay, aren't they, Dad?" she asked during a quiet moment. "It'll take time," I said honestly. "What happened to all of you? That kind of trauma doesn't just disappear. But they're survivors, just like you." Agent Chin approached us with an update on Rachel. She's cooperating fully with the investigation. Her testimony is helping us identify other members of the trafficking network. But David, you should know, she's facing federal charges. Conspiracy to commit kidnapping, human trafficking, accessory to multiple felonies. She's looking at 25 to life. Part of me felt satisfaction at that news. Rachel had sold our daughter to monsters for gambling money. She deserved whatever punishment the justice system handed down. But another part of me, the part that remembered the woman I'd married, the mother who'd once stayed up all night when Emma had pneumonia, felt something like pity. "Can I see her?" Emma asked quietly. Agent Chin looked uncertain. "That might not be the best idea right now. Your mother is in federal custody, and there are legal complications. I want to see her," Emma said with quiet firmness. "I need to understand why." 3 days later, they arranged a supervised visit at the federal detention center. Emma and I sat across from Rachel in a sterile conference room, separated by bulletproof glass and monitored by federal marshals. Rachel looked like she'd aged 10 years in a week. Her expensive clothes had been replaced by an orange jumpsuit, and her carefully maintained appearance was gone. She looked small and broken. "Emma, I'm so sorry," Rachel began, tears streaming down her face. "I know that's not enough. I know nothing I say will ever be enough. But why?" Emma interrupted. "Just tell me why." Rachel stared at her hands for a long moment before answering. "I was scared. I owed money to dangerous people, and I convinced myself that it would just be temporary, that they would let you go after a while. You sold me, Mom. You sold your own daughter. I know, and I'll spend the rest of my life regretting it. But Emma, you have to believe me. I never thought they would actually hurt you." Emma leaned back in her chair, studying her mother with an expression far too mature for a 16-year-old. "You didn't think about me at all. You only thought about yourself and your gambling debts." "That's not true." "It is true. And the worst part is, I'm not even surprised. You've been choosing yourself over me my whole life. This was just the biggest choice." The silence stretched between them, filled with years of disappointment and broken promises. Finally, Rachel spoke again. "What happens now?" "Now you face the consequences," I said. "The girls you helped traffic, the families you destroyed, the lives you ruined. You're going to answer for all of it." "And Emma?" Emma answered for herself. "I'm going to heal. I'm going to help the other girls heal. And I'm going to make sure this never happens to anyone else if I can help it." 2 months later, the trials began. Vincent Moreau was convicted on 47 counts of human trafficking and sentenced to life without parole. His organization was dismantled, and dozens of other traffickers were arrested based on evidence recovered from the compound. Rachel pled guilty to conspiracy charges and was sentenced to 30 years in federal prison. She would be eligible for parole in 15 years, when Emma would be 31 years old. "Do you think you'll ever visit her again?" I asked Emma after the sentencing. We were sitting in our backyard, watching the sunset paint the California hills gold and orange. Emma had started seeing a trauma counselor and was slowly returning to something like normal life. "Maybe," Emma said thoughtfully. "Not for her sake, but for mine. I don't want to carry this anger forever." "You don't have to forgive her." "I know, but I don't want to let what she did define the rest of my life." My daughter was 16 years old and already wiser than most adults I knew. The other 19 girls we'd rescued were scattered across the country now, reunited with their families and beginning their own healing processes. Emma stayed in touch with some of them, and they'd formed a support network that helped all of them cope with what they'd experienced. As for my team, Marcus, Tony, Jake, and me, we'd officially never existed that night. The FBI had made sure of that, protecting us from potential retaliation while ensuring the legal proceedings focused on the traffickers rather than our unauthorized rescue operation. But we all knew the truth. We'd done something that mattered. We'd brought Emma home, and we'd saved 18 other girls in the process. Sometimes that's enough. 6 months later, Emma and I stood in the courthouse steps in downtown Los Angeles, surrounded by 18 other families whose daughters had been rescued that night. The final member of Vincent Morrow's trafficking network had just been sentenced to 40 years in federal prison. "It's really over," Emma said, squeezing my hand. "The legal part is over," I replied. "The healing part takes longer." Emma had grown stronger over these months, but I could still see the shadows in her eyes sometimes. Trauma doesn't disappear just because justice is served. It lives in the quiet moments, in sudden fears that seem irrational to everyone except those who've lived through hell. But my daughter was a fighter. She'd returned to school, though she'd switched to a different high school where she could start fresh. Her art had changed, darker themes, but more powerful too. Her counselor said it was healthy, that she was processing her experiences through creativity. More importantly, Emma had found purpose in her pain. "Dad, I've been thinking about something," she said as we walked to our car. "I want to start a foundation, something to help other trafficking survivors." "Tell me more." "Art therapy programs, support groups, maybe scholarships for girls who've lost time from school because of what happened to them. I want to turn this nightmare into something that helps people." I stopped walking and looked at my daughter, really looked at her. 6 months ago, she'd been a typical 16-year-old worried about college applications and weekend plans. Now she was talking about dedicating her life to helping others heal from trauma. "That's a big responsibility, sweetheart. Are you sure you're ready for it?" "I'm sure." "Dad, what happened to me was horrible. But it happened to 18 other girls too, and hundreds more we didn't save. If I can use my experience to help even one person, then maybe it wasn't completely meaningless." That evening, we had dinner with Marcus, Tony, and Jake, a monthly tradition that had developed over the past 6 months. The 4 men who'd risked everything to bring Emma home had become an extended family, and Emma had taken to calling them her uncles. "So, I hear you're starting a foundation," Tony said, passing Emma the mashed potatoes. "Still in the planning stages," Emma replied. "But I've been talking to some of the other girls we rescued. 3 of them want to help." Marcus smiled. "That's going to be one powerful organization. A bunch of survivors who refuse to stay victims." "Speaking of which," Jake said, "I've got some news. The FBI wants to hire me as a consultant for their anti-trafficking task force. Turns out our little unauthorized rescue operation impressed some people in Washington." "That's fantastic," I said. "You'll be perfect for that job." "What about you, Dad?" Emma asked. "Any exciting career developments?" I'd been dreading this conversation, but there was no avoiding it any longer. "Actually, I've been offered a position with a private security firm. They specialize in international rescue operations, kidnapped executives, missing persons cases, that kind of thing." Emma put down her fork. "That sounds dangerous." "It can be. But it's also a chance to do what we did for you on a larger scale. Help other families who are going through what we went through." "Where would this job be based?" "Here in California. I'd travel for cases, but this would still be home base." Emma considered this for a long moment. "Would you be working with Marcus, Tony, and Jake?" "If they're interested." Marcus grinned. "Are you kidding? You couldn't keep us away. We work well as a team." "Then I think you should do it," Emma said firmly. "Just promise me you'll be careful." "I promise." After dinner, Emma and I sat on our back porch, looking up at the stars. It was the same porch where we'd sat the night before she was taken, when our biggest worry was her college applications. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if Rachel hadn't betrayed us?" Emma asked. It was a question I'd pondered many times over the past 6 months. "Sometimes, but I try not to dwell on it. What happened, happened. We can't change the past, but we can control what we do next." "I used to hate her," Emma said quietly. "For the first few months, I would lie awake at night imagining all the things I wanted to say to her. all the ways I wanted her to suffer. And now I mostly feel sorry for her. She's going to spend the next 15 years in prison, and when she gets out, she'll be an old woman who destroyed her relationship with her only child for gambling money. That's a pretty terrible punishment. My daughter's capacity for forgiveness amazed me. I wasn't sure I could be as generous with Rachel, but Emma was choosing to let go of her anger rather than let it poison her future. I got a letter from Sophia yesterday, Emma continued. Sophia was one of the girls we'd rescued from the basement. She's doing well. Started college early, actually. She says the foundation idea inspired her to study social work. That's wonderful. Dad, can I ask you something? Anything. Do you think Mom ever really loved me? The question hit me like a physical blow. I took a deep breath before answering. I think your mother loved you as much as she was capable of loving anyone. But Rachel always loved herself more than she loved anything or anyone else. That's not your fault, Emma. That's not a reflection of your worth. That's just who she is. Emma nodded slowly. I think I needed to hear that. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, father and daughter, survivors of a nightmare that had somehow made us stronger. I love you, Dad, Emma said eventually. I love you too, sweetheart. More than you'll ever know. I know. You came for me. Even when everyone else said I was just a runaway, you never stopped believing. You brought your team into danger to save me and 18 other girls. That's love. 2 years later, the Emma Carter Foundation had helped over 100 trafficking survivors reintegrate into society. Emma was starting her sophomore year at UCLA, studying psychology and criminal justice. She wanted to become a trauma counselor and eventually work for the FBI. My private security firm had successfully completed 12 international rescue operations, reuniting families and shutting down criminal networks across 3 continents. Rachel was still in federal prison. Emma had visited her twice in 2 years, not to reconcile, but to maintain her own sense of closure and forgiveness. Some stories don't have happy endings. Some families never recover from betrayal and trauma, but some do. Sometimes love is stronger than fear. Sometimes justice prevails over evil. Sometimes a 16-year-old girl who survived hell can transform that experience into a force for healing others. Sometimes, when you refuse to give up on the people you love, miracles happen. And sometimes, that's enough.